Steve Goodin, I think, welcome for the first time to the Bill Cunningham Show. Steve, how are you?
Yes, sir. Good. How are you?
Well, good. You heard some of our discussions last week about Christopher Phoenix and how bad it is. And then we got the Sheriff Richard K. Jones doing what he's doing, which is not allowing Narcan to be carried by his deputy, which, by the way, about two-thirds of police departments in Ohio don't have their cops or deputies carrying Narcan. That's not unusual, but this got a lot of press for it. And many Americans, I get calls all the time, Steve, that talks about enough is enough. We're spending too much money. But because you're the board chair of the Center for Addiction Treatment here in the city, I wanted to get your perspective on it. Are we spending enough money? Do you understand how taxpayers are fed up?
No, I absolutely get how taxpayers are fed up. I mean, I'm on the right side of the aisle myself. I get fed up. And look, there's a kind of a heroin fatigue that's settling in. I get it. I have it. We're 10 years into this thing, and people are tired, and they want to make sure that their taxpayer dollars are spent well. That said, I mean, we are still in the throes of something, a public health kind of crisis that we haven't seen in a generation. We had 876 EMS runs in Hamilton County alone last year that dealt with ODs.
How many?
876 was the number I got.
ODs.
Yeah, EMS runs that ran from ODs. The ODs themselves were roughly 400 fatalities. So we're talking, crazy numbers and a huge taxing, of taxpayer resources from that standpoint. So we're still out there advocating at least for some dollars to go to treatment. And I know there's some dollars that go to treatment that are certainly wasted, but when you have some of the smaller nonprofits like Cat House and Prospect House and the Veterans Group Joseph House, I mean, those are folks who really tailor the stuff and spend every dollar well.
How much, can you give me some idea, because you're chair of the addiction treatment. Can you give me some idea what % of those who go through heroin detox and treatment, which takes months and months and never really come out of it, what % actually 3 years later or so aren't back into heroin? Is it 50-50, less or more?
Well, it depends by the program. We're having a great result. I mean, for instance, right now, the folks in our program who go all the way through, and that means they go through a detox, they go through a 28-day program in-house, and then they go through this kind of aftercare program where they have some medication and so forth that are supervised by a doctor. Those folks, we have a 76% employment rate on the folks who go all the way through the 12 weeks. Now, the problem is hanging on to people for the 12 weeks.
Right.
Life intervenes, relapses occur, and so forth and so on. So, we feel strongly that we've got a kind of wraparound services thing here that works. We try to place, our view is if the person isn't working at the end of it, the treatment isn't going to work. I mean, they have to be gainfully employed and actually involved in life and away from the people that they were around. And that's why we're so passionate about this program, and why I think a lot of lawmakers, particularly Republican lawmakers, have been passionate about our program too. It's a bit different. But yeah, I mean, but you're right. On average, treatment, I mean, recidivism rates, typically hover around 60%.
And the thing is, if you're not working by the time you come out and you get up Monday morning, it's 8, 9, 10 o'clock Monday morning, you got nothing to do. You get up Tuesday morning, you got nothing to do. Wednesday night, you're not doing anything. And idle mind is the devil's workshop. You've got to have some essence during the day that motivates you to get up, take a shower, brush your teeth, put a suit of clothes on, or put some blue collar on and go to work. Go do something. Then when you come back, it's 5, 6 o'clock. You're kind of a little bit tired. Want to have a little dinner, take a walk, go to bed. If you don't have a job, an idle mind will cause you to slide back into heroin, correct?
Well, right. I mean, I just base it on my personal experience. By the time I work and run around with my kids, I'm too tired to get in trouble. I'm too tired to do anything. And that's kind of the theory we're working on here is, folks, if you're working, you're around a different class of people, a different kind of person. You're around other people who are gainfully employed and taking care of themselves. And you've kind of, our goal is to try to get people to rejoin society. And that's why we feel strong about it.
Yeah, and if you don't rejoin society, you got no shot. And when I get up in the morning, I'm on the websites. I check things out. My mind is active. I go to Starbucks, get my lemonade with a splash of raspberry. I ride the range a little bit, check some things out, come in here about 11 o'clock, and I start getting my producers and Greg Shirts, et cetera. And if somebody doesn't get up in the morning and go to work, now how hard is it for employers for you to find work for someone who's a heroin addict?
Well, it's getting a little bit easier because Ohio has sort of loosened up on its expungement laws in the last 2 years. We can now get some of these things off people's records, and that's something that we do work with. But I'll tell you, I mean, there are manufacturing jobs. I just talked to one of my business clients here the other day. I mean, there are manufacturing jobs, particularly in northern Kentucky, that are going unfilled still for lack of reliable employees.
Right.
There is work out there, and
thousands of jobs.
Absolutely. And
I'll give you another example. A good friend of mine, Wayne Carucci, owns Gateway Distributing. They got $10 an hour jobs for loading trucks. Now, loading trucks can be, when it's 90 degrees, a little difficult. You're in a warehouse. Right. There's no air conditioning, and it's work. He said we can't find reliable employees at $10 an hour, and then when they work their 90 days, they go up to $12, $13 an hour, and if they're there for a year, they get benefits. He said it's the way out of the hole, but we cannot find good employees.
But we've heard it from numerous employees or employees who can't pass, people who will show up but can't pass a drug test.
You got to pass a drug test.
Yeah, and we're hearing that over and over. So, I mean, this area, I mean, really, I mean, there are manufacturing type jobs still here. There are good entry level jobs here that folks just they need some help plugging into, and that's something that any program that's worth its salt in this space has to have a workforce development component at the end where the folks are. If you get someone through treatment and you put them back on the street, they're going to drift around the same evil people who got them in this space to begin with.
All right, lastly, Steve Goodin, CAT Board Chair. Let's talk about every dollar spent in treatment results in what? You have some stats here from the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Tell the American people.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's some pretty significant, I think, and convincing research that shows that if you spend $1 on treatment, that you save $4 to $7 back on law enforcement costs, including EMS runs and police activity and that sort of thing. And also, if you factor in the cost of uninsured health care, because most of the folks here that are ODing are, of course, not insured. Not even Obamacare insured, not insured at all. You and I are paying for that. So suddenly the savings goes up to like $10 to $11 for every dollar spent if you figure it that way. So, we would argue that even though heroin fatigue is settling in, and we absolutely get it, that this is still a good investment for people, for tax dollars. And as long as you have a program that's a good steward, like I think ours is, it's worth doing.
Lastly, Steve Goodin, cocaine, crack cocaine, you have these waves of drug addiction. We're about 10 years into the heroin crisis. You're an expert in the field. Do you see us going up the hill, at the top of the hill, or come down the other side? Are we still, every now and then when I talk to experts, and I have a great job because I get to speak to the best people in the country, they tell me we're 5 to 10 years away from an intravenous shot that will take away the desire of an alcoholic or a drug addict to take drugs or alcohol. And I said, if that shot ever comes, and the endorphin, the receptors, the pleasures, whatever the hell they are, if you can take a shot every 30 days, and you have no desire for alcohol, and if you take alcohol, you become violently ill, or if you have no desire for heroin, and you take the shot, you get sick. In other words, it washes out of the system that addiction gene. We're 5 to 10 years away. Is that the only cure to what you see?
Well, it's certainly going to play a role. I mean, there are medications like Suboxone and Vivitrol now that kind of block the receptors. It doesn't kill the craving, but they do block your ability to get high, and we administer those under a doctor's care at CAT, and I know there's several other agencies locally that do that too. But you're right, some of those changes are going to happen. But when we look back at the crack epidemic, which I knew well, I was in the county prosecutor's office for 6 years during the 90s and early 2000s. I saw it firsthand. Most of those individuals, unfortunately, they either went to jail, got sober, or died. I mean, that was it. And we're sort of on a similar track here.
Right.
Heroin, though, is a little bit different in that it is uniquely addictive. The chances of overdoses are much higher than it was with cocaine because the heroin is cut with these sedatives. So you're playing Russian roulette every time you use it. And we have all kinds of different people getting involved because they get hooked up, particularly a lot of the veterans we see. Right. They get hooked up at the VA on different synthetic opiates, like Vicodin or oxycodone, and then the next thing you know, they can't afford it, and their prescription's cut off and they're using. So it's a different population, so I mean, I think we are on the back end of it. I do think the medication's promising, but I don't think anything beats good old-fashioned sobriety.
Steve Goodin, the chairman of the Center for Addiction Treatment, also with Graydon, Head, and Ritchie, Raise Ipsa Loquitur, Nunc Pro Tunc. And Steve Goodin, thanks again for coming on the Bill Cunningham Show. We'll do it again, and thank you.
We're honored. Thank you very much. Take care.